Bartholomew Town, bringing Rhode Islanders closer to their world since 2018. Brought to you in part by the University of Rhode Island Online, Newport Film, Half Street Group, Navigant Credit Union, and the Audubon Society of Rhode Island.
Bartholomew Town.
Welcome into Bartholomew Town. I'm Bill Bartholomew, welcoming back to the show for, I don't know, it feels like it's maybe the fifth or sixth time, especially if you include debates, but Congressman Gabe Amo, thanks for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Bill. Always good to visit with you and chat about the things that are important to people across Rhode Island.
There's so much to get into. There's obviously things that we can look at from a macro level on a planetary basis, global policy basis. Some would argue survival of the species, but let's start with Rhode Island right now and kind of actually merge these conversations together. You had an op-ed in the Providence Journal, the headline, Trump's budget will devastate Rhode Island communities. Seems pretty self-explanatory, especially when you look at from the healthcare piece alone. It's just an utterly shocking and frankly ridiculous situation we're facing. We'll see how the Senate decides to pursue this. But executive summary of that op-ed, what motivated you to write it? Again, pretty obvious, but then into the material itself. I mean, what's going on and what are the specific things that Rhode Islanders should know about the proposed budget?
Yeah, so, we're talking about a very specific process called budget reconciliation. And I know there's a lot of government speak when it comes to what's happening out of Washington. This is really important for people to understand. So when President Trump gets sworn in, he immediately tasks out his minions, in effect, the members of Congress in the United States House of Representatives and the Senate, to give him a package of legislation that delivers on his promise to give handouts to the wealthiest Americans. I mean, he literally had events during his campaign said, "You're filthy rich, I'm going to make you richer." And that's the core of this package, so that everybody's clear on it. That is the big focus. Yeah, it's got some other things around there, but that's what they want to do. So effectively, in this process of reconciliation, it allows you to bypass the filibuster in the Senate. So it is an inherently hyper-partisan piece of legislation. And so through this process, there were instructions given out to the various committees in the Congress. I serve on the Budget Committee in the House of Representatives, which gives me an opportunity to see the first part of this, where those instructions are given. And they were given instructions to cut programs across the healthcare space, Medicaid specifically, because you can't touch Medicare in this process. You can't touch Social Security in this process. To cut food assistance, SNAP, from the Department of Agriculture's budget, also to tinker with a lot of programs at the Department of Education, including the Pell Grant. And so what they went and did is had those committees put together all of these cuts, with Medicaid being the biggest, so that they can pay for, because there are rules around this, they have to pay for the tax cuts. And they're going to go borrow a whole bunch of money, trillions of dollars, to make this happen. And so why this is an existential crisis for us in Rhode Island and for people across the country is the fact that Medicaid will be cut. Medicaid is a dynamic federal program. It covers, in Rhode Island, 40% of pregnant women and their babies. It covers 65 to 67% of those in nursing homes. It covers 37% of kids. 22.1% of Rhode Islanders get Medicaid in some form. Folks on disabilities, with disabilities. And so when you cut away at that, 41% of our state's budget, that's an existential crisis. Moreover, why this is such a problem is that they are moving so fast, right? President Trump is, he's been president, 150, 160 days, something like that. I might be off by a little bit, but he's been president for this short period of time, but is laser focused on this wealth transfer. And effectively, there have been independent analyses from the Congressional Budget Office to say that the bottom 10% is literally going to have a net loss of income. At the same time, the top 10% is getting more, an actual transfer. This is reverse Robin Hood. This is taken from the poor and giving to the rich. So I wrote this op-ed because I think you gotta set the stage and address the stakes, because sometimes the government work can be opaque. It can seem like you've got these folks in Washington working on things that aren't connected to you. This is intimately connected to the future of our state. It's intricately connected to health outcomes. It's intricately connected to whether our food bank will be able to support the people across this state. And that's why I focused on it. Now I'm hopeful that we are able to kill this legislation. There's still time. It's over to the Senate now. Senators Reid and Whitehouse are going to do everything they can with their colleagues. But let's be very clear. We got some people with a great amount of malice. You heard Senator Joni Ernst from Iowa say, well, we're all going to die anyway. And she doubled down on it. Now, we're not talking about death at a ripe old age of, 85, 90 to 100. Like, we are living longer, we're supposed to be. She is comfortable with a system where people die because of inadequate health care. That is what that statement is. And that is unacceptable from any leader. And that's why I'm fighting tooth and nails to stop this thing from happening. But I know it's hard because we are not in the majority. Democrats are not in the majority in the House or the Senate. And it's important for people across this state to know that. And across this country, we are operating in a system where we don't have the numbers, but we're going to try to get those 4 in the House or 4 in the Senate to make this go away.
And to that point, from a conversational level, and in terms of your Republican colleagues, regardless of the outcome, regardless of how they actually landed on a vote, what are some of the concerns that you've heard? Because healthcare is not a partisan issue. It's a human issue. And you would think that, and we've certainly even heard in media, some Republican members of Congress express concern and disappointment with some aspects of the big, beautiful bill.
Yeah.
But by and large, I mean, are you hearing anything that would lead you to believe that, okay, there may be some people about to throw in the towel from the Republican side on this Trump agenda? Or is everybody just getting in line, whether it's fear of being primaried or some other duty that they feel party over country?
Well, look, I think you might find some strange bedfellows on this. For example, look at Senator Josh Hawley from Missouri, someone who I probably don't have much of agreement with on a range of issues. There might be a few things here or there, but he is born out of the MAGA movement or adjacent, recent rise of conservatism, and he has said, "Don't cut Medicaid." Because he's from a state like Missouri, right? I've been to Missouri. I've been to both St. Louis and to Kansas City, and there's a whole lot in the middle. And a lot of it is deep red, but it's also deeply poor and impoverished. And that is what he is responding to. You have someone like Susan Collins, someone like Lisa Murkowski, who have been part of this alignment of people to reject the MAGA at times, right? This is iffy with them, right? There's a lack of consistency. But I think the mission over this next few weeks, because to get this big ugly bill forward, they have been given a deadline, these Republicans, by the president. I want this done by 4th of July. Now, that is incredible speed. Every independent opinion or analysts and both opinion writers have all suggested that this is the fastest moving bill for one of the biggest, from a dollar amount perspective, one of the biggest dollar amount pieces of legislation in history to be moving through in 7 months is really unprecedented. So I think there's light, but we have to be loud and vocal. It's why I reach out to allied organizations in red states. You see, they're all afraid of town halls. They don't want to talk to their constituents. They're afraid. They're afraid. So look, will there be some light? Potentially. Time kills deals, as they say in business. So the more time that we have here, that we create, that we make the message and articulate it, to know the stakes, because I don't want people to hurt. There's a lesson to be learned when people are hurt, but I don't want to wait for people to hurt. This is a do no harm job, I believe. And we're going to keep fighting as hard as we can.
It sets in motion this conversation that's so fundamental, I think, and isn't oftentimes expressed enough, which is that instead of looking at things through a left-right paradigm, a lot of people ought to start looking at things through an us versus them paradigm, a dangerous precedent. But the us is most Americans, because if you think about the Rhode Island example, roughly 22% of people with now questions about whether their healthcare plan will be available from an insurance standpoint. There's a large chunk of people, in fact, most people who are not going to benefit from this legislation, from this bill, Republican, Democrat, any iteration therein. I mean, doesn't it seem like this is the moment where the United States as a species would say, whoa, wait a second. This isn't
Yes.
one, what we voted for, and two, this is not only not sustainable, it's actually, as noted by a member of Congress that would suggest that we're all going to die anyway. It's actually a life or death moment in American history. Do you think that people are getting the message enough?
I don't think they are.
Mm,
And look, I think that we all bear responsibility for that. You know, whether it's me and my job to set to take responsibility and set the stakes of what's on the line. But certainly, look, folks on the fourth estate, making it clear like we've normalized some of
yeah.
this. The discourse is sometimes is okay. This is the crazy Trump tweet of the day, which is in some ways a distraction, right? A distraction from the material loss that people will have, not only to their economic livelihoods, which they've already experienced through the fear of tariffs, through the destabilization of lots of our entities. Look, it's about to be hurricane season, and if we aren't prepared for that, you're going to see loss of property, but also the health outcomes of our people, the ability for kids to get school lunches. One independent projection has suggested 18 million kids could lose access to school lunches. I'm not a fear monger, right? One would say, if you know me, that I am a very optimistic, positive person with a big smile. But this is not a smiling or laughing matter. This is serious. And
Yeah.
so, you hear from people, sometimes on the radio, sometimes on TV, elsewhere, saying, oh, Democrats just want to scare people. I, Here's the thing. I would love for nothing more than these programs to stay in place and people to keep what they have. It is not to my benefit or the benefit of this country, really, to see bad things happen. So if I have a clarion call to action, to mobilization, to voices saying that these are the consequences, that is not about fear. It's actually about hope. Having a brighter day where everybody can be healthy, have an economic livelihood that befits their hard work, and have a hopeful future that's not about enriching the top 1%. They don't need any more money. They don't. If you're in the top 1%, God bless you. Maybe you worked hard, maybe you got it from somewhere. That's okay. But why should I take from the poor and those working really hard, those who are the vast majority of the population, so you can buy more, luxury toys and vacations and goods. You can do that already. You have the dough.
Right.
This is part of being an American.
Yeah. And it's not only financially, we're seeing from a natural resource standpoint issues as well. And even with just some of the proposed appointees and existing appointees to cabinet offices, there's this notion of, let's use the right word, I think. It's not quite oligarchy yet. Maybe it's Diet Coke oligarchy, but boy, is it trending in that direction. And you use that word, and all of a sudden, in my case, if it's on the radio or
Yeah.
podcast or on PBS or something, email flood with people, you're just a fear monger. I'm not sure that there's really any other way to put it besides wealth transfer, oligarchy, indifference to suffering.
And look, that is the big challenge that we're facing. And this is the work that we have to do. The work is in. I truly believe for in any movement, in any march towards progress, is to make sure that the information is being disseminated and it's factual and it's connecting to the reality. But we have, a really disparate sort of way that people are experiencing and feeling things. And I always tell people this, in my encounter with life in politics and government, that it's about how people feel, right? And we have to do a better job of making people more connected to those feelings, not just theirs, but those of their neighbors, those in their community who will be negatively impacted. Because if one of us suffers, we all suffer in some way or another. And I am really, really hoping we can avert that with this big, ugly bill. But then we have to do that work of rebuilding our politics, and that's a much bigger project that's going to take a long time.
No doubt. Last couple of minutes here, and Gabe Amo, Congressman from Rhode Island, joins us here on the podcast. Look, I think right now there's so many issues we don't have time to properly dissect global affairs at this moment, and we don't have time to necessarily go too deep into even some of the domestic issues. But looking at Rhode Island right now, I mean, we're
Mm.
talking to a Rhode Island audience. Look, bad polling number for Governor McKee. We had the pollster from UNH, Andy Smith, on the radio we're taping this on a Tuesday. We had him on Monday to explain the data behind it. Whether it's an outlier or not, the McKee administration, 19% of Democrats in favor of the governor. But that reflects a broader trend, even if that is an outlier, of Democrats right now seemingly struggling to find their footing as to what the party is, where it's going. And there are specific issues that are really dividing the party right now, especially on a foreign affairs basis. But you're sitting here right now. We're about a year-ish away from really understanding what a 2026 election is going to look like from a congressional standpoint on a national basis. We're seeing low polling numbers and disconnect in terms of understanding what the Democrats actually are. What can be done, understanding it's summer, but what can be done in the next 6 months to not only push back against what you just did, and I think quite well on this I love the big ugly bill statement, because that's exactly what it is, but to push back on that, but also to say, okay, this is what's happening here. This is terrible, but here's what we're going to do. Here's who we are as a party, and here's why you should believe in us. What's your take?
Look, I think the question and your framing hit the nail on the head on the task, right? You can not merely be against people who are on ballots, and you can't merely be against the policies that the sort of, in my case, the majority is pursuing. To be a opposition party, you have to give something that is in opposition as an alternative to what is being offered, right? Look, I will be the first to admit Democrats are far from perfect, and we are far from ready. We have to have a great amount of humility that says that there were losses, right? You look at counties across this country that trended in the other direction, and who knows what the outcomes could have been if we had more time. It could have been even worse. Could have been better. I don't know, but I have a snapshot of that moment, and that snapshot says that things need to be improved. So I think there are 3 ways that you go about it, right? And there's a dispute right now amongst these things. I think you have to do all of it. One, it's the policy ideas. Do people vote on policy? Do they not vote on policy? That has been a question for a long time. But I have some really ugly policies that have things on the other side that make more sense, right? In terms of the provision of healthcare, that is a rising cost for people, pharmaceutical drugs, so much to just make it through, right? So I do think we have to come up with a set of policies that are relative to people's economic fortunes, but also connected to the things that they've been telling us directly. Housing across this country. I don't care where you go in this country, someone is talking to you about housing, right? It's why I've pushed legislation on the conversion of government buildings at the state, local, and federal level, and getting tax credits to help boost that, supporting the affordable housing tax credit, doing things to spur production, because I know for wealth to transfer, you need to have wealth start somewhere. And so many people my age, at 37 years old, don't own homes. I'm a renter myself, right? So that there are real core things that people have been telling us. So that's one, the policies. I think healthier housing are 2 to start with. The second, right, are the messengers, right? The authenticity. We talk about generational change here and there. That's been a topic. Look, I'm more different than anybody who's ever had my job before. So, and I'm very conscious of that. But at the same time, I know that there are more things than just being a person with a biography. What vigor are you demonstrating? How connected are you? Are you living a life that is authentically relatable to the people who you serve. That matters, right? And so when I talk about my life experiences, I'm not saying it because I want to put myself on a pedestal. It's no, I know the struggle. My mom was a nursing home nurse. My dad owns a liquor store. My siblings, some gone to college, some who didn't. Everybody, got different paths in life. The nieces and nephews that I think of and the schools that they go to, these are real things, but we have to speak about it like real human beings, like people who are making it through. There's nothing that separates me because I have an honorific in front of my name from the experience of the people that I serve. And then the third thing is the operational, is the mobilization, is the message, right? The message, right? It connects to the policy and it connects to the people, but the message can't be something that's just driven by some poll tested thing that you get a survey for 535 people and they say, well, I think the color blue should stand for progress, right? Like, it can't be these abstract notions that aren't based on lived reality. We have to have a mobilization operation that is connected. I started my career knocking on doors for candidates. I knocked on doors, and born from those conversations, built operations to then keep a cycle of engagement. A big part of this is young people. We've seen a trend of young people move towards President Trump. I don't think that's a lasting thing, but they have to have an alternative, right? And it can't merely be based upon a cult of personality in a presidential campaign. That is fleeting. What is lasting is connection and feeling like you are part of a party, a movement, but a set of values, right? And the mobilization, I think, in the long term depends on the values. What are we fighting for and who are we fighting against? And you need both. You need both. So those are the three segments, and the party has to figure out how to do that. But remember, there's not one party. I don't want people to be discouraged because they say, oh, well, the Democratic Party. Look, there are Democrats in the House of Representatives, and Democrats in the Senate. There's a DNC, which is a whole separate operation. There's no one thing. So I say, if you want to fix something, you want to make something better, pick up a shovel and dig. Let's get to work. So that's what I'm going to be talking about as I get on the campaign trail. And we're going to be successful in 2026. I believe Democrats will win the House. And not just because of the trend lines today, because I've seen many of the candidates. I've helped recruit people. I'm talking to them. We have what it takes, but I don't want to win an election. I want to win a generation. And that's the task.
Well said. Appreciate your work, Congressman, and appreciate your time today here on the podcast. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, Bill. Great to be on with you.
Hey, thanks for stopping by Bartholomew Town. For more content, follow me on Instagram @BillBartholomew.